I knew the message was going to appear before anyone else at that table did, and that was why I smiled when my son picked up his wife's phone. At 68 years old, I had learned that betrayal rarely walks into a room shouting. It usually sits down beside you, asks for mashed potatoes, compliments your roast, and pretends it still belongs in your family. That Thursday night, my dining room in Columbus, Ohio, looked like something from a holiday magazine. The pot roast had been in the oven since noon. The green beans were buttered. The apple pie was cooling on the sideboard. I had set out the white china Richard and I received on our wedding day 43 years earlier, the plates with the thin silver rim I used to save for anniversaries, baptisms, and Christmas Eve. Across from me sat my husband, Richard Whitmore, 71, wearing the navy sweater I had folded for him that morning, as if we were still a normal couple preparing for a peaceful divorce. Beside my son Michael sat his wife, Ashley, 36, blonde, polished, soft-spoken, and wrapped in the cream scarf I had given her last Christmas because she once told me she loved anything that made her feel elegant. She looked elegant that night. She also looked comfortable. That was what nearly broke my heart, not the secret itself, but how easily she buttered a dinner roll in the house where my son had grown up, under the same roof where I had rocked him through fevers, packed his lunches, mailed his college applications, and prayed that the woman he married would love him better than the world had taught people to love. Michael thought this was a farewell dinner before Richard and I signed the divorce papers the next morning. He thought his father and I had simply grown apart after 4 decades. He thought Ashley was there to support him. Poor boy. He did not know his wife had already chosen another side of the family. He did not know my husband had been carrying on a hidden relationship with her behind closed doors. He did not know that the divorce Richard called peaceful had been planned like a quiet little robbery. But I knew. I had known for 6 days. I knew about the hotel receipt folded in Richard's coat pocket. I knew about the photograph Diane Miller slid across my kitchen table with tears in her eyes. I knew about the notes in Richard's desk mentioning the cabin at Lake Erie, my pension, the house equity, and something that made my stomach turn cold, Michael's silence. So when Ashley's phone lit up beside her water glass, I did not flinch. Richard did. He reached for his napkin too quickly, his hand knocking the fork against his plate with a bright little clatter. Ashley glanced down, and the color drained from her face. Michael noticed. He had always noticed small things. He got that from me. Before Ashley could turn the phone over, Michael picked it up. His eyes moved across the screen, and I watched the moment my son's life split in two. The message was from Richard. It said, "After Friday, she can't touch the cabin." Michael read it once, then again, slower. Ashley whispered his name, like she could soften the meaning before it landed. Richard cleared his throat, the way he used to before lying about money. I set my coffee cup down very gently. No one spoke. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked, as if it had been waiting all these years for this exact silence. Michael looked at his father, then at his wife, then finally at me. His face had the stunned, wounded look of a child who had opened the wrong door and seen the adults without their masks. I did not cry. I had done my crying alone, in the laundry room, with the dryer running so no one could hear me. That night was not for tears. That night was for truth. I folded my hands on the table, looked at my son, and said, "Read the rest, Michael." Michael's thumb hovered above the screen, but before he moved, my mind went back to the Friday before, to the morning I still believed the worst thing waiting for me was the end of my marriage. Richard and I had an appointment scheduled for the following Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning at Claire Bennett's office downtown. At that time, I thought Claire was simply helping us close a door with dignity. I had told myself that people our age did not need drama, not after 43 years of shared mortgages, Thanksgiving turkeys, hospital visits, snowstorms, graduation photos, and ordinary Tuesday nights watching the local news from opposite ends of the same couch. Richard had been cold for a long time, but coldness can fool a woman who has spent her life making excuses for everyone else's weather. I thought he was tired. I thought retirement had made him restless. I thought his silence came from age, pride, or the kind of disappointment couples collect quietly after too many years of not saying what they mean. When he first suggested divorce, he did it over breakfast, while I was rinsing blueberries in a white ceramic bowl. He stood by the kitchen island in his gray robe and said, "Margaret, maybe we should stop pretending we are happy." I remember the water running over my hands. I remember one blueberry rolling into the sink and circling the drain. I remember thinking how strange it was that my heart did not break loudly. It just sank, like a stone dropped into a lake. He told me he wanted things peaceful. He used that word 3 times. Peaceful. He said we could divide what needed dividing, keep lawyers from turning it ugly, and spare Michael the pain of choosing sides. That last part touched me because Michael had always been my soft place. Even at 42, with a mortgage and a thinning hairline and a wife who smiled like she had practiced in mirrors, he was still my boy. So I agreed to be reasonable. I agreed to meet Claire. I agreed to let Richard sleep in the guest room while we worked through the paperwork. I even agreed when Ashley called that same afternoon and offered to come by with soup, as if my ending marriage were a neighborhood cold. She sounded so gentle on the phone. She said, "Margaret, I cannot imagine how hard this must be for you." She called me Margaret, not Mom, though she had used Mom for years when she wanted something warmer from me. I should have noticed that. I should have noticed the careful distance in her voice, the way she asked whether Richard was home, the way she paused when I said he had gone out to run errands. But grief makes a person polite. Shock makes a woman grateful for any kindness, even kindness with fingerprints on it. That week, Ashley became very present in my life. She texted in the mornings asking if I had eaten. She called in the evenings to say Michael was worried about me. She stopped by once with banana bread from a bakery on High Street and stood in my kitchen looking around like she was memorizing the cabinets. Richard acted irritated whenever she came, but not irritated enough. He would leave the room, then return freshly combed. He would pretend not to listen, then answer questions no one had asked him. I told myself I was being unfair. I told myself suspicion was just loneliness wearing sharper shoes. By Wednesday night, Richard and I had reviewed the first draft of the divorce papers at the dining room table. He kept tapping one finger near the section about the house equity. He said the cabin at Lake Erie should be discussed later because family memories made things complicated. I looked at him across that polished oak table and felt the first thin wire of unease pull tight inside me. The cabin had been left to me by my father. It was not a family bargaining chip. It was mine. Still, I said nothing. I had not yet found the receipt. I had not yet seen the photograph. I had not yet understood that the woman bringing me banana bread was helping my husband measure the walls of the life I built. But that night, as Richard folded the papers and told me again that peace was best for everyone, I remember thinking that peace, in his mouth, sounded less like mercy and more like a trap. The receipt appeared the next morning in the most ordinary way, which is how life often hands you the truth when it is tired of watching you lie to yourself. Richard had left his brown wool coat draped over the chair by the back door, the same chair where Michael used to drop his backpack after school. It was chilly for late March in Columbus, cold enough that the maple branches outside the kitchen window tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. I was not searching for anything. I was doing what I had done for 43 years, picking up after a man who believed the house quietly cleaned itself. I reached into his coat pocket before taking it to the laundry room, expecting a grocery list, a cough drop wrapper, maybe one of the mint candies he kept stealing from the bowl at the bank. Instead, my fingers touched a folded piece of paper, thick and glossy from a credit card machine. At first, I almost threw it away. Then I saw the hotel name printed at the top. Not a hotel near the airport for business travel. Not a hotel across town where someone might stay after a snowstorm. It was a small place near downtown, 20 minutes from our house, the kind with polished brass lamps in the lobby and weekend packages for people who wanted privacy without going far. The date was Tuesday. The time was 8:46 in the morning. 2 breakfasts had been charged to the room. 2 coffees. 2 omelets. 1 side of fresh fruit. I stood there with Richard's coat over my arm and felt something inside me go very still. I did not feel wild. I did not feel confused. I felt as if a curtain had been pulled back an inch, not enough to see the whole room, just enough to know there was someone standing behind it. Tuesday morning was the same morning Ashley had texted Michael from what she called a church committee meeting. I remembered because she had sent me a cheerful message afterward asking whether I preferred cinnamon or plain banana bread. I had answered cinnamon. I had even added a little heart at the end because I still believed manners could protect a family from falling apart. I folded the receipt exactly along its old creases and placed it inside the blue tin on my kitchen shelf, the one painted with tiny white daisies where I kept recipe cards from my mother. It seemed strange, putting proof of betrayal beside instructions for peach cobbler and Thanksgiving stuffing, but I wanted it somewhere no one would think to look. Richard came home around noon carrying nothing but a newspaper and the smell of cold air. He kissed the top of my head the way a man does when he wants credit for tenderness without the trouble of sincerity. I asked him if his errands had gone all right the day before. He said yes, very ordinary, very dull. Then he opened the refrigerator and asked whether we still had roast beef. I watched the back of his neck while he searched for leftovers, and I wondered how many. Years I had mistaken calm for honesty. That afternoon, Ashley came by with the banana bread. She wore fitted jeans, tin boots, and that cream scarf looped loosely around her neck. My scarf. My Christmas gift. She hugged me at the door, and I could smell her perfume, light and expensive, like white flowers in a department store. She said, "Margaret, you look tired." I told her I had not been sleeping well. She touched my arm with both hands and said, "I am so sorry you are going through this." Her eyes even shined a little, as if she had practiced sympathy until it could pass for the real thing. Richard stayed in the den while she was there, but twice I saw him through the doorway, standing where he could hear us. Ashley asked if the divorce papers were almost finished. She asked whether I planned to stay in the house alone. Then, too casually, she asked about the cabin at Lake Erie. Was it hard to maintain at my age? Would I really want to make the 3-hour drive by myself? I sliced her banana bread and placed it on my good dessert plates. My hands did not shake. That was when I understood the receipt was not the end of the story. It was the first page. Ashley did not look like a woman comforting her mother-in-law. She looked like a woman walking through a house she expected to inherit, counting the rooms before the owner had even left. After Ashley left that afternoon, I stood in the kitchen with the knife still beside the half loaf of banana bread, watching the crumbs scatter across the cutting board like something small and ruined. Richard came in a few minutes later and asked if she had gone. His voice was too casual, the way people sound when they already know the answer but need to measure how much you know. I said yes. He nodded, poured himself coffee, and carried it into the den without looking at me. That was the moment I stopped asking my heart to be fair. Fairness had made me quiet for too many years. Fairness had taught me to explain away cold dinners, locked phone screens, strange errands, and the way Ashley had begun looking at my home with the careful interest of someone studying a floor plan. I wrapped the banana bread in foil, placed it in the trash under yesterday's newspaper, and wiped the counter until it shone. Then I took the receipt from the blue tin and read it again, not because I needed to, but because proof has a weight to it, and I was learning how to hold it. Around 4 o'clock, just as the sky turned the pale gray color that comes before an Ohio rain, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Diane Miller was standing on the porch in her red raincoat, clutching her purse with both hands. Diane had lived next door for 27 years. She had brought casseroles when my mother died, watched Michael ride his first bicycle down our driveway, and once helped me shovel 12 inches of snow when Richard claimed his back was acting up. She was not a dramatic woman. She did not gossip at church. She did not knock on doors without a reason. That was why my stomach tightened before she said a word. She asked if she could come in, and I stepped aside. In the kitchen, she refused coffee, which told me everything. Diane always accepted coffee. She sat at my table, the same table where Richard and I had reviewed the divorce papers, and opened her purse slowly. Her fingers trembled when she pulled out a small white envelope. "Margaret," she said, "I have gone back and forth all day about this, but I would want to know." I did not reach for the envelope right away. Some part of me understood that once I opened it, the life I had been pretending to lose politely would become something uglier. Finally, I took it. Inside were 3 printed photographs. The first showed Richard standing beside a silver sedan in the parking lot of the same downtown hotel printed on the receipt. The second showed Ashley stepping out of the passenger's side, her head turned toward him, one hand adjusting the cream scarf at her neck. The third showed them walking toward the hotel entrance, not touching, not doing anything anyone could call indecent, yet carrying the unmistakable ease of 2 people who had stopped fearing consequences. I stared longest at the scarf. I had bought it at Macy's the week before Christmas, wrapped it in silver paper, and written, "For my beautiful daughter-in-law, with love, Margaret." I remembered Ashley holding it against her cheek and saying it was perfect. Now there it was in a photograph I wished did not exist, tied neatly around the throat of the woman who had been smiling in my kitchen 2 hours earlier. Diane kept apologizing, but I barely heard her. She told me she had seen them while picking up her sister from a doctor's appointment nearby. She had not wanted to assume. She had taken the pictures only because something about the way they moved together felt wrong. I placed the photos on the table in a straight line, one beside the other, and the strange thing was that I still did not cry. My sadness had gone quiet and deep, but something else had risen above it, steady as a hand on a railing. I asked Diane if she still had the originals on her phone. She nodded. I asked if she would be willing to email them to me and, if necessary, confirm when and where she took them. Her eyes softened, as if she had expected me to fall apart and found instead a woman she had not met before. Of course, she said. Anything you need. After she left, I carried the photographs to the blue tin and placed them beneath the receipt, between my mother's recipes and a card that read Michael's 7th birthday cake. Then I stood there in the quiet kitchen, listening to Richard laugh at something on television in the den. For the first time in nearly a week, I did not feel like a wife being abandoned. I felt like a witness. That evening, after Diane left, I moved through the house as if every room had become unfamiliar to me. Richard was in the den with the television too loud, laughing at a sitcom rerun he had seen a dozen times before. I stood in the hallway and listened, not to the show, but to the ease in his laughter. There is something chilling about hearing a person sound comfortable while sitting in the middle of what they have broken. I went upstairs, changed into my robe, washed my face, and waited until the house settled into its nighttime rhythm. Richard always fell asleep in the guest room by 10:30, with the lamp on and a hardcover mystery open across his chest. At 11:15, I walked down the hall in my slippers and paused outside his door. I could hear him breathing, slow and heavy. Then I went to his study. For years, I had treated that room like his private kingdom. I dusted around his desk, but never opened drawers. I vacuumed beneath his chair, but never touched the locked file cabinet. I respected boundaries because I believed a marriage needed trust. That night, trust felt like a language spoken by fools. The study smelled like leather, old paper, and the cedar blocks he kept in the closet. His desk lamp made a small circle of gold across the surface, illuminating a legal pad, a stack of mail, and the silver pin Michael gave him for Father's Day. I did not know what I was looking for until I saw my name written in Richard's blocky handwriting on the yellow paper. Margaret, house equity, pension, cabin, timing. My fingers went cold. I sat in his chair and pulled the legal pad closer. Beneath those words were notes that made the receipt and the photographs feel like only the beginning. He had written questions about whether my father's cabin at Lake Erie could be argued as marital property because Richard had paid for repairs over the years from our joint account. He had listed the approximate value of my teacher's pension, the balance in our joint savings, and the amount still owed on the house. There were arrows, numbers, and little stars beside anything worth money. Then I saw the line that made my chest tighten so sharply I had to put one hand flat on the desk. Michael's silence. Under it, Richard had written, "Keep him calm. Ashley can help." I stared at those 4 words until they blurred. Ashley can help. Not Ashley might understand. Not Ashley feels bad. Ashley can help. She was not just a betrayal that had happened to us. She was part of a plan. A soft voice on the phone. Banana bread in my kitchen. Questions about whether I could manage the cabin alone. Every gesture had been wrapped in concern, but underneath was calculation. I opened the top drawer and found copies of documents Richard had no reason to keep there. The deed to the Lake Erie cabin, old repair receipts, tax papers, our last bank statement, and a printed draft of the divorce agreement with certain sections circled in red ink. Beside the papers was a sticky note with Ashley's handwriting. I recognized it immediately from birthday cards and thank you notes. It said, "Do not let her delay after Friday." The words were neat, rounded, almost pretty. I remember thinking how strange it was that cruelty could have such nice penmanship. I took out my phone and photographed everything, one page at a time, careful to keep the corners visible. I did not rush. I did not shake. The more I read, the calmer I became, because grief had a limit, but evidence gave me direction. Richard had believed I was too sentimental to protect myself. Ashley had believed I was too old, too tired, too grateful for scraps of kindness to question her. They both mistook my silence for weakness. When I finished, I returned every paper to the exact place I had found it, turned off the lamp, and stood for a moment in the dark study. The rain had started outside, tapping softly against the windows. From upstairs came the faint sound of Richard turning in his sleep. I slipped the phone into the pocket of my robe and walked back to the kitchen. The blue tin was waiting on the shelf, innocent as a recipe box. I opened it and placed nothing inside this time. The photographs were already backed up. The receipt was already safe. What I had found tonight belonged somewhere stronger than a tin of old family recipes. It belonged with a lawyer. For the first time since Richard had asked for peace, I understood what peace really meant to him. It meant I should stay quiet while he and Ashley divided my life into pieces. I closed the cabinet, looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window, and whispered to the woman staring back at me, "No more." The next morning, I woke before sunrise and made coffee the way I always had, 1 scoop for each cup and 1 extra because Richard liked it strong. Habit is a stubborn thing. Even when love has been emptied out of a house, your hands still remember where the filters are. Richard came downstairs at 7:15, freshly shaved, wearing the pale blue shirt he always chose when he wanted to look respectable. He thanked me for the coffee without meeting my eyes and asked whether I had slept. I said a little. That was true enough. I had slept for exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes, sitting upright in the living room chair with my phone in my lap and the photographs from his study already uploaded to a private folder. He told me he was going to the bank later to ask a few questions about moving some money before Friday, just to keep things simple. I looked at him over the rim of my mug and said simple sounded nice. He smiled, relieved by my obedience. That smile taught me more about our marriage than most of our anniversaries ever had. After he left for what he called errands, I put on my gray coat, packed a manila envelope with the hotel receipt, Diane's photographs, copies of the cabin deed, screenshots of Richard's notes, and the draft divorce agreement, then drove downtown through a light morning rain. Columbus looked washed out and ordinary. Office workers crossing Broad Street with paper cups in their hands, buses hissing at curbs, flags moving weakly in the damp wind. It amazed me that the world could keep functioning while mine was quietly being rebuilt inside a folder on the passenger seat. Claire Bennett's office was on the 5th floor of a brick building with brass elevator doors and framed Ohio landscapes in the hallway. When I had first met Claire, I thought of her as polite and efficient, the kind of attorney who would help 2 tired older people end things without unnecessary cruelty. That morning, when she opened the conference room door and saw my face, her expression changed before I said a word. I placed the envelope on the table between us. Then I told her everything in a voice so calm it almost frightened me. I told her about the receipt, the hotel, Ashley's questions, Diane's photographs, Richard's notes, the cabin, the pension, and the phrase Michael's silence. Claire listened without interrupting. She only took notes, her pen moving steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Margaret, the peaceful version of this divorce is over." I nodded. Strangely, hearing that did not scare me. It steadied me. For days, Richard had used peace like a leash, hoping I would mistake quiet for goodness. Claire explained what we could do immediately. We would document every piece of evidence, notify the bank that no major transfers from joint accounts were to be made without proper authorization, separate my personal accounts from anything Richard could access, secure my pension information, and gather records proving the cabin had come from my father. She reminded me that the cabin mattered not only because of money, but because it had a paper trail, and paper trails were stronger than guilt. While she made copies, I called the bank from her office phone. My voice did not tremble when I verified my identity. It did not tremble when I changed passwords, requested alerts, and asked for written confirmation on account activity. Then Claire helped me draft a new set of instructions. I was not signing anything on Friday. Not the version Richard had circled, not the version he had imagined, not the version Ashley had encouraged from my kitchen table while wearing my Christmas scarf. By noon, Claire had prepared a revised legal strategy, and I had made an appointment with the estate attorney down the hall. By 2 o'clock, my will was being reviewed. By 3, the spare cabin keys were no longer in the kitchen drawer where Richard could find them. I drove home with both hands on the wheel, feeling older than I had that morning, but far less afraid. When I walked into the house, Richard was in the hallway, holding his phone and wearing the irritated look of a man whose easy path had suddenly developed a locked gate. He asked where I had been. I hung my coat in the closet and told him I had gone out for a little clarity. Then I went to the kitchen, took down the blue tin, and set it on the counter. For the first time, I did not open it. I did not need to. The woman who had hidden proof among old recipes was gone. In her place stood a woman with copies, confirmations, passwords, and a lawyer who knew exactly where to begin. By the time Thursday came, Richard had begun watching me the way a man watches a door he suspects might close before he can get through it. He asked too many small questions. Was I feeling all right? Had I spoken to Claire again? Did I still plan to be at her office Friday morning at 10 o'clock? Each time, I answered with the calmness he had mistaken for surrender. I said I was tired. I said there were still things to think through. I said Friday would come soon enough. What I did not say was that Friday no longer belonged to him. Claire had already sent the revised paperwork where it needed to go. The bank alerts were active. My pension records were secured. The cabin deed was copied, verified, and sitting in a file at the attorney's office, far beyond the reach of Richard's desk drawer and Ashley's pretty handwriting. That afternoon, I called Michael and invited him and Ashley to dinner. My voice sounded warm, almost ordinary, and that was the cruel mercy of motherhood. Even when your own child is walking toward heartbreak, you still make sure he has a chair at the table. Michael sounded relieved. He said he had been worried about me and wanted us all to have one quiet evening before the appointment. I told him that was exactly what I wanted. Then I called Ashley. She answered on the third ring, breathless and sweet, as if she had been waiting beside the phone. I said I hoped she could come too, because family should not leave things unfinished. There was a pause, just long enough to tell me she was choosing her response carefully. Then she said she would love that. Love. People use that word so easily when they have emptied it of meaning. I spent the rest of the day preparing the meal with the precision of a woman setting a clock. I seasoned the pot roast the way Michael loved it when he was a boy, with garlic, onions, carrots, and potatoes tucked around the edges of the pan. I made green beans with butter and sliced almonds, mashed potatoes with cream, and an apple pie from my mother's old recipe card. Every familiar smell rose through the house like a memory trying to be kind. Richard came into the kitchen twice, lingering near the doorway, asking why I was going to so much trouble. I told him our son deserved a decent dinner. He looked relieved again. That was becoming his mistake. At 5:30, I took the wedding china from the cabinet. The silver rims caught the light as I placed each plate on the dining room table. For places, for water glasses, for folded napkins. I set Richard across from me because I wanted to see his face. I set Michael beside Ashley because he needed to see hers. Beside my own plate, under a plain linen napkin, I placed a slim folder. Inside were copies of the hotel receipt, Diane's photographs, the notes from Richard's study, the page with Ashley's handwriting, and the confirmation letters from the bank and my attorney. I did not place the folder in the center of the table. Not yet. Truth has timing. Served too early, people deny it. Served at the right moment, it leaves them nowhere to hide. At 6:15, Ashley arrived first. She wore a soft beige coat, pearl earrings, and the cream scarf again, as if the universe had a sense of theater. She hugged me at the door and told me the house smelled wonderful. I smiled and said pot roast always made a house feel honest. Her expression flickered, but only for a second. Michael came in behind her with a bouquet of grocery store tulips, yellow ones, my favorite since he was 10 years old, and bought me a bunch with his allowance. He kissed my cheek and whispered, "Are you okay, Mom?" I touched his face and told him I would be. Richard came downstairs at 6:25, freshly combed, wearing the navy sweater from the first part of the evening he had not yet understood he was entering. For almost 20 minutes, we performed the old family play. Michael talked about work. Ashley complimented the potatoes. Richard asked for salt. I poured iced tea and listened. The grandfather clock ticked in the hall. The folder waited beside my plate. Then, during dessert, I mentioned the cabin at Lake Erie as casually as if I were discussing the weather. I said I might drive up there after everything was settled, just to air the place out. Ashley smiled too quickly and said the pipes would probably need checking because the back bathroom always froze first. Michael turned his head toward her. He had never been to that cabin in winter with her. I had never told her about the back bathroom. Richard set down his fork. The apple pie sat untouched between us, cinnamon rising into the silence. Ashley looked at me, then at Richard, and in that single glance, my son saw the first crack in the wall they had built around him. I did not reach for the folder yet. I simply lifted my coffee cup, took one slow sip, and waited for the next mistake. The silence after Ashley mentioned the back bathroom did not break all at once. It stretched, thin and trembling, across the table. Michael looked at his wife with a puzzled frown, the kind he used to make as a boy when a math problem did not fit the answer in the back of the book. Ashley blinked too quickly and reached for her water glass. Richard's hand moved toward his napkin, then stopped halfway, as if even his fingers understood they had betrayed him. I set my coffee cup down gently and looked at Ashley, not with anger, but with patience. People who lie well can survive questions. They cannot always survive silence. Michael said, "How would you know that, Ashley?" His voice was low, not angry yet, only careful. Ashley gave a small laugh that sounded polished around the edges and hollow in the center. She said I must have mentioned it once, maybe during Christmas, maybe when we were all talking about winter storms. I had not. Richard cleared his throat and said it was not important, that everyone was tired and emotions were high because of tomorrow. Tomorrow. He kept saying that word as if it were still a bridge he could walk across. I looked at him and almost felt sorry for the man he had been pretending to be. Then Ashley's phone lit up beside her dessert plate. It was face up because she had been showing Michael a photograph of a co-worker's new baby earlier, trying to perform normalcy with one hand while holding panic with the other. The screen glowed bright in the warm dining room light, and for one clean second, everyone saw the name before anyone touched it. Richard. Michael's eyes dropped first. Ashley reached for the phone, but my son was faster. He picked it up, not roughly, just firmly, with the stunned authority of someone who finally understands a door has opened in front of him. Ashley whispered, "Michael, please." Richard said his name too. Sharper this time. Michael did not answer either of them. He read the message. After Friday, she cannot touch the cabin. His face changed in a way no mother should have to witness. It was not only pain. It was recognition arriving late and demanding payment. He looked at his father, then at his wife, and the room seemed to lose all its air. Ashley started explaining before anyone asked her to. She said it was not what he thought. She said Richard had been under pressure. She said I was confused about the cabin and they had only been trying to keep the divorce from becoming ugly. The more she spoke, the smaller her kindness from the past week became. All those texts, all that banana bread, all those soft touches on my arm, shrinking down into tools. Michael scrolled. His thumb moved once, then again. I saw his jaw tighten. He read words none of us repeated aloud. Plans. Timelines. Questions about whether I had spoken to Claire. A line about keeping Michael calm. Another about waiting until the papers were signed. Richard stood, then sat back down when no one followed his movement. He said, "This is private." Michael finally looked at him and said, "My wife and my father do not get to call this private." That sentence landed harder than shouting would have. Ashley began to cry, but even her tears seemed uncertain, as if they did not know which audience they were meant for. She turned toward Michael and said she had been lonely, confused, scared about their marriage, but he held up one hand, and she stopped. I watched my son, my 42-year-old boy, sit beside the woman he had trusted and across from the man who had raised him, and I hated both of them most for making him feel foolish. That was when I reached for the folder beside my plate. The linen napkin slid away as I placed it in the center of the table. No one touched it at first. They all stared as though it were something alive. I opened it myself. First, the hotel receipt. Then Diane's photographs. Then the copies from Richard's study. Then the sticky note in Ashley's neat handwriting. Then the bank confirmations and the letter from Claire Bennett's office. I laid each page down slowly, one beside the other, surrounding the apple pie no one had finished. Richard's face went gray. Ashley's tears stopped as quickly as they had started. Michael picked up the photograph of Ashley stepping out of the silver sedan, wearing the cream scarf I had wrapped with my own hands. His fingers tightened at the edge of the paper. I said, "I knew for almost a week. I wanted to be wrong. I gave both of you every chance to show me I was wrong." Richard opened his mouth, but I continued before he could dress another lie in the language of peace. I told them Claire had the originals. I told them Diane had agreed to verify what she saw. I told them the cabin was protected, my pension was protected, and no version of the divorce papers Richard had circled in red ink would ever receive my signature. Then I looked at Michael, because he was the only innocent person at that table besides me, and my voice softened. "I am sorry you had to learn it this way." He stared at the papers, then at Ashley, and finally at Richard. In that moment, the truth did what I had waited all week for it to do. It did not scream. It did not beg. It simply sat there, undeniable, in the middle of my dining room, while the people who thought I was weak discovered I had only been quiet. For several seconds, nobody moved. The dining room that had held birthdays, Easter brunches, and Michael's high school graduation dinner now held a different kind of ceremony, one without candles or speeches, only papers, proof, and the sound of a family finally hearing itself break. Richard was the first to reach for dignity, but it slipped through his fingers before he could hold it. He said my name in the old way, low and warning, as if 43 years of marriage still gave him the right to decide when I was allowed to speak. I looked at him across the table and felt nothing sharp, only a wide, exhausted clarity. I told him the appointment at Claire Bennett's office had been changed. I told him there would be no friendly signature at 10 o'clock in the morning, no quiet agreement, no peaceful little arrangement built on my confusion. He said I was overreacting. Ashley nodded too quickly, grateful for any word. That made betrayal sound like a misunderstanding. Michael stood then, slowly, with the photograph still in his hand. He looked at his father and asked how long. Richard did not answer. Ashley began to say it had not been planned, but Michael turned to her with a face I barely recognized and said, "Please stop helping me lose respect for you." That silenced her more completely than anger ever could. He placed the photograph back on the table, folded his napkin with the careful manners I had taught him, and walked to the hallway. Ashley followed him, crying softly, saying his name again and again, but he did not turn around. At the front door, he stopped only long enough to say, "Mom, I will call you tomorrow." I told him I loved him. He nodded, and that small nod carried more grief than any shouting could have. When the door closed behind them, the house seemed to exhale. Richard and I were left alone with the cooling pie and the papers he had never expected to see outside his study. He sat down heavily and rubbed both hands over his face. For the first time in years, he looked old to me, not wise, not powerful, just old and caught. He said Ashley had made him feel needed. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because men like Richard always think being wanted explains what they destroyed. I told him need was not love, secrecy was not romance, and planning to take a woman's security while asking her to smile through dinner was not a mistake. It was a choice. He asked what I wanted from him. I said I wanted him out of my bedroom, out of my finances, and out of my future. By midnight, he had packed 2 suitcases and gone to a hotel across town. Not the same one. Even he had enough shame left to avoid that. The next morning, while he waited for the divorce he thought he controlled, I sat beside Claire in her office with my purse in my lap and signed papers that protected me instead of pleasing him. Over the following weeks, the house grew quieter. Michael filed for separation from Ashley. He did not discuss every detail with me, and I did not ask. Some wounds belonged to the person carrying them. Richard's attorney tried to question the cabin, but paper has a memory people cannot rewrite. My father's deed held. My pension held. The bank records held. Diane's photographs held. Ashley's handwritten note held. Piece by piece, the little plan they had built around my silence came apart in daylight. Spring arrived slowly in Ohio that year. One Saturday in May, I drove 3 hours north to the cabin at Lake Erie by myself. The back bathroom pipes were fine. The porch needed sweeping. The lake was gray-blue under a wide sky, and the air smelled like wet wood and clean wind. I opened every window, made coffee in the old percolator, and sat on the porch wrapped in a quilt my mother had sewn before Michael was born. For the first time in a long while, no one needed me to pretend. No one asked me to be peaceful so they could be comfortable. No one called my silence forgiveness. I thought about the white china still stacked in my cabinet back in Columbus, the apple pie no one finished, and the folder that had turned a dinner table into a witness stand. For 43 years, I had served meals to my family because I believed love meant feeding people even when they failed you. That Thursday night, I served something else. I served the truth, and unlike dinner, it did not go cold.